Hello everybody, it's Sarah, and today I have a video for you that I'm gonna keep short and sweet, or I'm gonna try to keep short and sweet, and that is an unhaul. Since I did my last unhaul last year, I kind of have constantly picked books off of my shelves, since space is a constant scarce resource on my shelves. And I have stored them under my desk, and now it's time. It's been about a year since my last unhaul. I thought I'd share them with you very quickly. I have 30 books right here that I'm gonna unhaul. And yeah, most of these books actually aren't even books that I actively dislike. Most of these books are just books that were fine enough, I guess. Or they were books that are first in a series where I'm just not interested in continuing on. And so yeah, I have some books here that you will probably just know from my channel and will never have heard of before. I have some books here by popular authors. I have some books here that are popular books. And so let's get into it. First, let's start with a few books that I'm not technically unhauling. I just borrowed them from my dad a few years ago, still haven't read them, and I'm just gonna give them back to him for now, because if I ever want to read them in the future, then I can still get them from him anyway. And the first of those is The Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. This is quite high up on my classics TBR shelf, but to be honest, if I read this, I want to get a pretty copy anyway, so it's gonna go back to my dad's. Then I have Robinson Crusoe by Danielle Defoe. Again, same case, although this isn't all that high up on my classics TBR, so I guess I'm just like gonna give it back to my dad. If I ever want to read it in the future, I will probably like borrow it from him again, not get my own copy, and then only get my own copy if I enjoy it, but it's gonna go back to his place. That's also the case with Cat's Eye by Margaret Atwood. Also, I think it was obvious, but the other two books and this one I have not read yet. Again, same case. Also, I want to get to a TBR 0 on my shelves for this year, for 2021. And so, you know, I'm just gonna give the books that I borrowed from my dad back to him, because I don't see myself wanting to read this in the near future. And then the last book I borrowed from my dad that I did, however, read is The Pages by Murray Bale, and I just didn't enjoy it enough to keep it. I don't even think my dad still knows that I have these books of his, so I could just keep them and pretend they're mine. But, you know, with this one, I'm not interested in keeping it, but since it's not mine, I'm not gonna give it away. I'm just gonna give it back. Gonna continue on with a few YA books. The first of those is Spellslinger by Sebastian de Castell. This is the first book in a series that is actually quite beloved on BookTube among those who have read it. But to be honest, I just first of all found the main character incredibly boring, and I second of all just absolutely did not like the way the female characters in this book were written. So yeah, not interested in continuing on with the series. Gonna get rid of this. I think it was one of my most disappointing reads of 2019, not 2020. Another most disappointing read, but this time of 2020, was Scavenge the Stars by Tara Sim. This one I didn't even finish. I DNF'd it because I thought it was so incredibly boring, which made me really sad, because this is a Count of Monte Cristo retelling, a YA Count of Monte Cristo retelling that's also gender bent, and the Count of Monte Cristo was one of my most surprising reads of 2020 that I really enjoyed. So yeah, but anyway, really didn't enjoy this one. Gonna get rid of it. Then I have The Abyss Surrounds Us by Emily Skritsky. This one, I mean, I enjoyed it when I read it, but gotta be honest, I don't have space on my shelves, and it's one of the books on my shelves that I enjoyed less, but that I also don't want to own for collection purposes. It's part of a duology. I don't intend to finish the duology, because, you know, the author has done some things that kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit, and so I just thought, you know what, whatever, I'm just gonna get rid of it. Then one of the worst books I read in 2020 was The Winter Duke by Claire Eliza Bartlett. This is a sapphic YA high fantasy retelling. However, the main character was one of the worst and most infuriating main characters I have ever read about, but I will leave all my most disappointing and worst 2020 books videos linked down below, so go and check it out if you want to know why exactly I'm gonna get rid of this. Then I have The Last Namsara by Kirsten Ciccarelli. This is the first book in a kind of companion trilogy, kind of along the lines of Kristen Crusoe actually, where, you know, all 3 books are kind of interconnected, but they all follow different characters. And I did actually quite enjoy this, but it's once again just a case of I don't have space on my shelves, and I'm not interested really in continuing on with the series. And so, you know what, I'm just gonna pass this on and hope someone else is gonna enjoy it more than I did. And the next 2 books are exactly the same reason why I'm unhauling them. The first of them is Crown of Coral and Pearl by Mara Rutherford. I just found this to be a very, you know, average YA fantasy. If you're really into YA fantasy, I can see you're really enjoying this. But for me, I'm just not the age anymore. Like, not even the age, but I'm just not the type of reader anymore. And I'm not interested in continuing on with the series, so I don't see any reason to keep this. And also the same is sadly true for Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. I enjoyed it well enough when I read it, but I also had quite a few problems with it, and then the more I thought about it, the more, like, you know, major those problems became in terms of writing, in terms of storytelling. I know this is a very beloved book, but then I've also heard that the second book, for a lot of people, even people that really enjoyed the first book, a lot of people were disappointed by the second book. And so, you know, I don't think it's worth it to force myself to read the second book, and I don't have space on my shelves, and so I am going to get rid of this. And I hope that someone out there, that some young person out there is gonna read this book and love it, and maybe read some YA because of getting this book that isn't centering white characters. Then another book where I kind of also had a similar deal as with Children of Blood and Bone, although with Children of Blood and Bone the problems that I saw were mostly storytelling problems, while with this book the problems that I started seeing were mostly, you know, representation, problematic, potentially problematic stuff. And that book is Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin. Again, also with this series, I enjoyed it well enough when I first read it. I pretty much read it in one sitting, but the more I sat on it and the more I thought about it, the less I liked the book in retrospective. And then when the second book came out, the reviews were pretty bad. So, you know, just not interested in continuing on and not interested in having this book on my shelves. Continuing on with a book where I'm actually just getting rid of one copy of the book, and that is Le Morte d'Arthur by Sir Thomas Malory. I am gonna get rid of the copy that I read from because I do have this pretty edition. I don't intend to reread this book, so having just this for display purposes is completely fine for me. And in the space where I had this one, there's gonna be up to 3 books that fit in here, so I'm just gonna get rid of this. Also, I'm really not mad at getting rid of this because I paid like €4 for this, so basically nothing. Another tome I'm getting rid of is IQ48 by Haruki Murakami. I have read a few of Haruki Murakami's short story collections. I did quite enjoy them, but I tried starting this multiple times, and I'm just not a fan of his writing style when it comes to like full-length novels, so I'm gonna get rid of this, not gonna read this. Next I have The Clan of the K-Bear by Jean Auel. And this one is just, you know, it's the first book in a series, which I didn't know when I picked it up like 10 years ago, which was a time when I quite enjoyed, like, you know, historical fantasy type stories. And I haven't picked it up since then. It's the first book in a series. I'm just not interested enough to get started on a series that probably, I think, as far as I remember, has like 6 or 7 books. And they're all quite chunky, so, you know, someone else is gonna enjoy it more than me. Then I have Atonement by Ian McEwan. I know this is a quite well-loved historical fantasy, but honestly, I have seen the movie. I enjoyed the movie well enough, so I know the story. I only own this because I was supposed to read it for my final exam in English, but then I didn't read it. I just watched the movie. And then also, Ian McEwan was one of the authors coming out in, you know, defense of J.K. Rowling. And I have said multiple times already, if I have read an author already and they kind of do some stuff that I consider problematic, that maybe not everyone considers problematic, but that I consider problematic, then I just decide on a case-by-case basis how much I enjoyed the book. But if I haven't even read the book yet, I'm just like, you know, I've lost all interest in reading the book, no matter if I maybe will love it or not. And then a book that I actually pulled from my TBR jar this month, read 5 pages and then decided to DNF it, was The Physician by Noah Gordon. This has also been on my TBR for quite a long time. And the reason why I DNF'd this was because on the very first page or second page there's already a description of a prostitute where like her boobs are spilling out because her corset or whatever is laced that tightly and you can see her nipple, and it's just like described in a really uncomfortable way. And I was like, oh wow, that's the type of historical fiction this is, huh? It's written by a man, and I mean, probability, if I finish the book, I won't mind those descriptions after all. I mean, I will mind the descriptions, but you know, I will love it enough to, you know, kind of ignore those descriptions. But to be honest, this is a 900-page book. Do I really want to give it the chance? No, not really. There's enough books that I know with a higher chance that I will enjoy them, so I'd rather spend the time, the like, I don't know, 30-40 hours that I'd spend reading this, reading those other books. Although actually not 30-40 hours, like 10 hours probably. Let's continue on to another TBR veteran of mine that I read the first 50 pages and decided to just, you know, not finish it, not read it, and that is Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. And the reason for that is that the first perspective of this book is a kind of very colonial perspective, and I'm gonna talk about it more in my mid-month check-in, but long story short, the way Indigenous people were described was very uncomfortable, and I didn't feel that the excuse of the fact that it was written from a white person during colonial times perspective, it didn't feel that the excuse warranted the way the Indigenous people were described. So yeah, that's why I decided to DNF this and not continue on with it. And you know, the same explanation as with The Physician. If I finished the book, maybe I'd end up not minding, but I just don't want to take the chance. There's so many books that I feel like reading more that I just don't feel the need to take the chance. Next, I have Das Kartengeheimnis or The Card Secret by Jo Steingade. I recently finished this and, you know, it was a fine enough story. I don't have space on my shelves, so I'm getting rid of it. Then next, I'm also getting rid of The Betrayals by Bridget Collins. This is kind of a dark academia type deal. And first of all, I did not enjoy the book whatsoever. I decided to keep it because I do have to say the cover is pretty fucking gorgeous, the spine as well. But then Bridget Collins also decided to end up to be one of those British authors who expose themselves as TERFs, and I was like, yeah, I already really didn't like the book anyway, so there's absolutely no reason for me to keep this on my shelves, because if I didn't like the book and the author is a TERF, then I don't even have the reason to keep the book to talk about it if I want to talk about negative books, you know? So yeah, getting rid of this. Now we're in the adult fantasy section. First I have 2 urban fantasies. The first is Cry Wolf by Patricia Briggs, which is the first book in the Alpha and Omega series, and I'm just like, I'm out of my urban fantasy phase, I'm out of my urban fantasy romance phase, and I did read this first book in the series last year because I had it on my physical TBR from the time when I was in that phase. But I'm absolutely not interested in continuing on with the series, so I'm getting rid of this. And exactly the same deal, although it has been a longer time since I read this book. I think I read it in 2014, if I remember correctly. But that book is Hounded, which is the first book in the I Am Druid Chronicles by Kevin Hearn. And yeah, this I'm slightly more interested in continuing on, but also I've heard a lot of not all that good things about the series, so, you know, I'm just not interested enough to keep this book and to continue on. Then in terms of high fantasy, I'm gonna get rid of the Second Sons trilogy by Robin Hobb. I DNF'd this like 100 pages into the second book just not interested in continuing on. I discovered I just really am not the biggest fan of Robin Hobb's writing when it comes to her first person perspective books following like one single male character as they're growing up, because I just don't tend to like that character all that much. I'm also not the biggest fan of Fitz, even though I know that's an unpopular opinion. And so yeah, I decided to get rid of the series because this is a lot of space free on my shelves. Also gonna get rid of my 2 German translations of George R. R. Martin books. I have read this one, which is The Dying of the Light. Haven't enjoyed it very much. Thought it was a very weak book. And the second one is Windhaven, which I haven't read, but I think it was written around the same time as this one. And so, you know, the only George R. R. Martin I'm still interested in continuing to read and also to reread is the Song of Ice and Fire series. So I don't need these on my shelves. Another series where I read the first book and wasn't a big fan of it, even though all the people who have read this, who like I follow on BookTube, have been quite big fans of this, is Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. I just wasn't a fan of the main character. I wasn't a fan of the damsel in distress trope, although it's not even a damsel in distress trope, and I heard that it's gonna change in future books. But to be honest, I'm not interested. I'm so not interested in continuing to read this. So, you know, I don't see any reason to keep this. I don't know. Since I started reading more adult high fantasy written by women, I'm just not at all interested in reading most of the series that I started and haven't finished that were written by men, like adult high fantasy, you know. I'm not interested whatsoever. I don't know why. I mean, I know why, but you know, I found my roots again and I'm happy with that. And the last book I have for this unhaul is A Song for Arbonne by Guy Gabriel Kay. And I have heard a lot of really good things about Guy Gabriel Kay, and that he has like one of the most beautiful writing styles within fantasy today. However, I have also heard from a lot of women who have read him that his descriptions of women tend to be quite sexist, and that his books tend to be quite sexist. And I also only have his book in a German translation, or this book in a German translation. So I decided, you know, if I'm ever gonna wanna pick up one of his books after all and see for myself if it's too sexist for me or not, then I'm probably gonna wanna do that in English anyway, since his writing style is known for being very beautiful. And so I can just get rid of my German translation of The Song of Arbonne. So yeah, that was it for all the books that I wanted to unhaul. Tell me in the comments down below if you have read any of these books, if you would have unhauled them as well, or if you really want to convince me to not unhaul them. If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media are in the description box down below, so go and check those out. All the links to my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, will read one adult high fantasy book written by a woman per month, will also be linked down below. And I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!